Nothing makes you question who you are, what you are doing, and where you come from than vacationing with your family. Than seeing old friends. Than being in places that you have been many times. This is not a what I did on my summer vacation story, but I can't divorce that I'm thinking about it as I arrived Friday from time in my old stomping grounds, my family's home in Massachusetts, Vermont mountaintops, Cape Cod beaches, Connecticut shoreline, and the streets of Boston. Maybe it is what I did on my summer vacation, sir. I left a week after we reflected together in this sanctuary on the shootings in our city. I was present for our citywide gatherings and sat behind the president at Symphony Hall and led conversations and attended vigils, and when I left, I was exhausted. It was a hard week, a hard month, and a hard year. So I went to refresh. And because I am who I am, I went to refresh, to have fun, and to think deeply about some things. I learned two things on my time away. One, what a wonderful thing we have here, and how fortunate I am to serve this church. I met former members of our church, sometimes by accident, like on the streets of Provincetown, Massachusetts. And each member I met said, there is no duplicating the experience at First Unitarian in Dallas. They were grateful for us, and they send greetings. The second thing I learned is that nothing common is forever, a lesson I have reflected on many times. By that I mean I sat by rivers like our poet, the poet that was read by Sally today. I noticed how common things are miracles, how like rivers the parts of our lives mature and change, and 1 minute you're a kid sitting behind your dad as he drives up familiar country roads to your grandparents' house, and the next minute you are sitting with your dad as he recovers from chemo and looks carefully at the last years of his life. I asked myself a lot of existential questions about this mystery that we are living on this vacation. The main ones, what matters and where have I come from? And I thought a lot about my family in between bouts of them driving me totally insane. And I thought about how their lives inform mine. I thought about my grandfather, who was a doctor, and my mother, who was a teacher, and how I am a preacher, all caregivers seeking ways to make lives better or have an impact of some sort. My grandfather came to it through his brilliance, a son of a shoemaker from Italy. He worked every day of his life while going to school, and by the age of 13, he was in college. He graduated med school at 21. He never stopped and always had time for his family. He held a gentle, laughter-filled court at Sunday dinner, at which I sat with him almost every week of my childhood. Thomas DeCiccio dodged smallpox and influenza epidemics as a child. He lost an eye by being kicked by swimming in the East River in New York City. He grew up in the streets of Italian Brooklyn. He lived through visits to his office by bleeding mobsters in New Jersey. He saw patients live and die. He got through so many obstacles, I probably will never know half of them. He was the chief of medicine when I was a child at the local hospital. He drove a Volvo P1800 sports car into which he had to wedge his little but very round Italian body. He was jolly and he was funny, and he could tell stories like nobody's business. My mother took that humor and storytelling and relish for life to teaching and activism. She had 4 kids, including twins. She passed on to me the love of children and a hope for our world. Put a small child in front of my mother and they will both learn something and they will end up laughing. I thought of these characters as I reflected on where I was from, those who in their own way touched many lives. My grandfather's patience ranged from the New York elite to those who were so poor they would pay him in homemade wine and tomatoes. My mother had many students before I was alive, and then kept our intentionally integrated town rich in diversity as she fought segregation and prejudice. When my grandfather died, we sent his obituary to the New York Times, and I remember being outraged that they didn't think he was as significant as we thought he was. It pointed out a flaw in us all, that we aren't so sure that we are important unless we are recognized for our accomplishments. Today, it's less about having your obituary in the paper and more about having your YouTubes watched. We are measuring our importance and self-worth on the number of people who click a little blue digital thumb on the things we put online. Now, I will say I'm not immune to that. I like my things being watched and seen and shared just as much as you do. But when we think that life only means something when we are thrust on stage and we are recognized for what we are doing, we are missing an essential spiritual lesson, at the same time acting out an essential human need. The spiritual lesson is that our value is not measured by recognition. It is measured by our character, by where we are from and what we have done with where we are from. My colleague, my predecessor, Laurel, in receiving her distinguished honor at our national meeting in June, said she was working on accepting recognition, that it didn't come easy, that it wasn't essential, but that she learned it's kind of nice. In her own way, she pointed to a basic human mystery, that our innate need to be known and remembered and understood and named and part of a story or stories drives us on. While recognition is nice, it's rarely sustaining. What matters is the quality of our character, the stories that point to it, and how we change or move through the scripts that we are given. We are actually now being bombarded with more stories than we can handle, and I apologize for being a preacher of stories. Every Tom, Dick, and Harriet is given 15 minutes or more of fame for a lot of nothing. My child, who knows the name of YouTubers, they are his heroes. People who are famous for getting 1 million people to follow them online, for making videos about people getting arrested or jumping off buildings into dumpsters on pogo sticks. What this proves, in a sense, is that we are desperate for attention. We are desperate also for the extraordinary. We are desperate to find miracles in the extraordinary rather than in the common. That's why I'm encountering movements around the world, from local food sourcing to homesteading, that are calling us back to a simple life, that are asking us to see the ordinary as miraculous. The truth is that there's a balance there. In the ordinary is miracle, and in miracle there is the ordinary. But no life is strictly ordinary. Each person we meet, each story we hear of adventures of frailty and courage and mishap and recovery and holy and unconsecrated moments. Each of us has stories that, if they resemble our own bumbling or struggle or triumphs, are instructive and deep in our lives. Each of us lives as adventurers, as works of art, no matter how boring we think we are. Each of us is a protagonist in our own drama. Forrest Church, who we're reading this summer, asks these questions. He says, ask yourself, are you a bit player in all your own drama, perhaps A Columbine, unhappy in love, tears painted beneath your eyes. Or maybe what they call in theater the fifth business, whose main purpose on stage is to explicate everyone else's story. Is your character consistent or merely predictable? What motivates you? Can you or anyone follow the logic of your imagination? What are your obstacles, objectives? What is your raison d'etre? Do you have one? What about your tragic flaws? Do you have any of those? Are you fixed on the periphery of your own stage or a worthy protagonist, true to the essence of your character, yet changing and growing over the course of your life? Does your character's story have spine? Do you participate fully in your own play's rising action? Or are you a spear carrier, at best a second waiting in the wings? Examining your character begs the examining of your story, of where you are from and what you have done and what you are doing with your life. And there are through lines. In Forrest's book, he keeps going back to this idea that there are through lines in our lives, and some of them we didn't make. My through lines include caring for others and adventure and storytelling that started way back maybe before my grandparents. Those through lines are the clues to the mysteries of our lives. They point to why we are here and what we are for. And true to life, those through lines are never linear. You see, a writer can create a clear through line, but ours is not a book. I was thinking about this standing in the Mystic Seaport on the last wooden whaling ship on Melville's birthday, thinking about his character Ishmael and how he drew a line between the inn where Ishmael met his friend Queequeg all the way to the end where he was floating on a coffin out in the water. I was thinking how rarely our lives are that clear. Things happen to us. We make choices. We can't make life problem-free, but we can script solutions. We can co-script the stories of our lives. But what we can't do is skip to the end. Forrest, in a sermon I read, was talking about a book called Are You Normal? Don't write it down. You don't have to read it. He polled thousands of Americans to determine, among other things, how many of us have called in sick for a day off, 58.4%. Or how many of us have flossed our teeth with our hair, 7%. Or how many reuse tinfoil, 44%. Or how many recycle unwanted gifts by rewrapping and presenting them to someone else, 54%. Or how many snoop in their host's medicine cabinets, 39%. The book said 60% of men spit in public and 3.9% of people don't wear underwear. Do not raise your hand. More to the point, the book discovered that 25% of us, 1 out of every 4 of us, skips to the end of any book we are reading. The truth is we can't skip to the end of our life stories no matter who we are. But we can script and co-script. Recently I read a story about Tsutomu Yamaguchi. Tsutomu was in Hiroshima on business for his employer Mitsubishi when the city was bombed at 8:15 on August 6, 1945. He returned to Nagasaki the following day, and despite his wounds, he returned to work on August 9th, the day of the second atomic bombing. That morning, he was telling his supervisor, how one bomb had destroyed the entire city, to which his supervisor said, "You must be crazy." And at that moment, the Nagasaki bomb detonated. In 1957, he was recognized as a hibakusha, an explosion-affected person of the Nagasaki bombing. But it wasn't until 2009 that the government officially recognized his presence at both locations. He died of stomach cancer in 2010 at the age of 93. Imagine his life. He did nothing to deserve being in those cities for those bombings, or surviving them, or living to his old age. He must have felt so many things about those experiences. But he didn't just give up. He co-scripted his story with those events. He became a vocal proponent of nuclear disarmament. He told an interviewer, "The reason I hate atomic bombs is because what it does to the dignity of human beings." He said, "I can't understand why the world cannot understand the agony of the nuclear bomb. How can we keep developing these weapons?" One thing I realized this summer, popping in and out of so many friends and family members' lives, is that our lives might not be as dramatic as Yamaguchi's. But they are full of opportunity to change the script, to develop our plots, to discover in them meaning. To fail to believe in our ability to create and discover meaning is a sin of the soul, and often looks more like giving up than encountering mystery. The point of all this is summarized in a quote by scientist and author Catherine Bateson, who said, "The individual effort to compose a life framed by birth and death and carefully pieced together from disparate elements becomes a statement on the unity of living. These works of art," she speaks of us, "these works of art, still incomplete, are parables in process, the living metaphors with which we describe the world." The great mystery story is us. And I say, to live in this mystery, we have to do a few things. To understand, as the poet said, though nothing special is happening nearby, that doesn't mean the world is lacking for detail. To understand that the mystery of life is often mundane, but so uncommon. And to understand that nothing common is forever. That even while we co-script our stories, we are not worthy only because of the recognition we get. We are worthy because we are actors on a stage of a host of miraculous moments. Forrest Church's words to close. He says, "I invite you to think about the theater of worship where we are right now. It's a different kind of theater. Superficially, it might appear that the preacher is the actor, perhaps God's prompter, and you, the congregation, the audience. But that is not how the theater of worship works. In truth, the preacher is the prompter, the actors are sitting in the pews, and God is the audience. It is you who are on center stage, not I," he says. "Standing in the wings, I serve at best as your prompter, reminding you of lines you may have forgotten. It is your play. You are the actor, and God is watching, a sacred presence filling the house, waiting to see how your play will turn out." Friends, the mysteries of life are as common as dirt. Dense and intricate is the embroidery of circumstance. We are not here just to paddle along the river or to sit by it and ignore the miracles we experience. We are here to witness the miracles of our common lives as the mystery of the world. That's what I was thinking about on my vacation. I'd love to talk to you more about it, but I'm done. Amen.